Good afternoon and welcome to The Joy is in the Journey. I'm Gina and I am blessed to be here with you today. And we have a very special guest from our network today. So happy to get a chance to speak with and to bring out the joy. And this person definitely brings that spirit, that joy out with them. And just so you know, if you're new to our show, what we do here is we talk about that absolute that is joy that is within each one of us so that we can bring out greater and greater ways to be expressing that. So, how do you tell somebody to, well, just be happy when they're not there? So, this show is giving so many different examples, different modalities, different opportunities to bring out joy in different ways. So today's guest I'm blessed to bring is Reverend Elzia Sekou, and he's part of our morning and evening prayer team, and he's also been a minister with CSL for over 11 years, and he is a member of the Centers of Spiritual Living Diversity and Inclusion Commission, the senior minister at CSL Denver, a former college professor, the previous chair for the City of Lakewood, Colorado's Cultural Diversity Commission. He's a lead application engineer, and he has some other loves that we will discuss and we'll bring out, but he's a busy man, and I'm like, you're doing all of this at once. And he just laughed, and with that perfect smile, he said, "Yes, just keep praying for me." And that's what it's all about, isn't it? So yes. I am so grateful to bring to you today Rev Z, even easier. There you go, Rev Z. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here and just expound on joy. I mean, as you say, joy is in the journey, which means that there's some up times and down times, but it's the whole journey that gets us excited and gets us fired up about this thing called life. And so I'm just happy to be here to talk about the journey.
Absolutely. It's beautiful every step of the way up to the mountaintop. It is not about when I get there. That's the whole thing. That's one of the things that I've never understood people. We live in a society of destination happiness. Well, when I have this car, this vacation, this job, this mate, then I'll be happy. And the truth always is, it's about being happy, and then you get the things that you want. Yeah. And, I have loved hearing from you on you have so many things that you do, but just on this network, in addition to the morning and evening prayers, you have 3 shows that you work with. And I want to start for our viewers there, because it's so important, because there may be people that know me and there may be people that know you. It's so important that we get to know all of the different programs that this amazing network offers us. So I'd like to start with that, if that's okay. And I'd love for you to tell me about New Thought Today.
So New Thought Today is a program that happens on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Mountain Time. And Reverend Robert and I, we look at the principles of New Thought in general and religious science in specific, and we look at how you apply it today. How do you make it relevant to your life right now? And so we talk a little bit of theory, and we'll talk about some visioning, but then we try to move directly into how does this apply in my everyday life? And it's something that's more than a theory or more than an idea or a conversation piece. So that's the gist of it. And we look at all New Thought, unity, divine science. We look at it all and try to, create that picture that it's all God. And so no matter which approach you take for the journey, we all headed, for the kingdom of God. So that's the ultimate. And so we're just trying to make that more palatable for everybody to take place.
It really is. It's not at any given point. It's not about what's actually being said. It's how we're looking at what's being said. It's the glass that we're looking through. You know, if our glass is dirty, or which means our preconceived notions or past experience or whatever it may be, we were taught as children or throughout life, however we're conditioned, all of those things color what it is we're looking at. So it's really about looking at things in a new way and trying to understand them in a better way.
Well, and you know, that's the good thing about any journey. It's a journey means there is a movement, that there is not staying in one place. And so as I go through these different valleys and peaks and mountains to get to wherever the destination is, I begin to learn that, okay, there's some things that may happen on this journey. You know, it might get cold, it might get wet. And so it begins to have me or anyone that's traveling the journey, this whole idea of being prepared and celebrating the moment and that whole thing that is encapsulated in a journey.
And it's important to know there's no right or wrong.
Yeah.
It's just about what's next.
Yeah, well, because I mean, just think about it. If someone's on the East Coast and someone's on the West Coast and they're going to somewhere in the Midwest, Chicago or Milton, Missouri, whatever, my journey from California is going to look and feel a lot different than yours coming from, you know, Boston or New York. And although we end up in St. Louis at the Arch.
Wouldn't it be boring if it was all the same? Imagine if every person we met, every circumstance, every situation, it's meant to be that, you know, it's, I call it colorful. Yeah. When life gets interesting. I like that word, colorful.
Yes, and that's a good analogy, because everything was green or red or blue or pick a color, it doesn't matter. If everything was the same color, nothing would stick out, right? It'd just be a flat line.
Seeming problems, that's what I can often call them. I'll say things seem colorful.
Yes.
So it's one of those, it's another way of looking at things.
For sure.
So now tell me about my favorite title on the network by far, Ministers Talking Sugar.
Yes, Ministers Talking Sugar. And that, you know, that's a Friday morning program. And if you're available tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Mountain Time, please join us. It's a program where we take, you know, 2 or 3 current events across the spectrum from, you know, medicine, politics, social, cultural, and we take a couple of ideas and stories and we look at them from a spiritual perspective. And so we will take, you know, any idea, it doesn't matter, anything that grabs our attention that we think is becoming prevalent or becoming on the rise for us to have to deal with from a spiritual perspective. And we talk to that issue. And then hopefully, if we're lucky and we don't get carried away, we come up with some spiritual nuggets on how to look at or deal with or approach these things that are happening in everyday life, in our current affairs, if you will.
And it's
a 30-minute show, so it's we hit it and quit it.
It's, you know, I coming into this practice definitely changed things for me, because I wouldn't watch the news, I wouldn't pay attention, and it made me negative. So my answer was to not do it. And I started Foundations with Reverend Ian, who was my senior minister 12 years ago. And it became clear that it is my job to be part of the solution, not to wait for somebody else to change things, that I must be the change I wish to see in the world. And by me hiding only allows things to grow in the direction I don't want. And it doesn't make me responsible in the sense of have to, but that I get to. So when you look at these things from a science of mind principles, and understand, well, how is all well when we look at things and they don't look well? How would you answer that?
Well, that's life, right? If we look at the compass, you hear people saying they want to be true north and all these different metaphors and affirmations that they use. Well, if you use that one or any of them, there's a north, south, east, and west, right? So there's no one direction. And as we were talking earlier, there's no one way to get to a destination. And so, I think life is they say a many splendid thing, which means there are many avenues, there's many aspects to it, and there will be down moments, there will be up moments, and they're all part of the journey. I love the joy of the journey because it fits so well. Is that you can set out on a journey, but you can't control the weather. You can set out on a journey and you can't control the pathway that ultimately gets taken. You set your course, but if something happens, you may have to get a detour. And so I think that's so fitting, at least in my life, of not always getting a direct route to the destination.
It's about adjusting the sails along the way.
Yes.
That's our attitude. Our attitude allows us to see things in a different way. Right. One of my seeming character defects at times can be self-righteous indignation. To know that I'm right. And that is irrelevant because being right and insane, crazy doesn't help me any. I placed an order in April online and it's still not here. So whether or not I'm right, it's still not here.
Right.
So the more I call, the more I get crazy. So the answer is just cancel it and let it go, because being right still doesn't get me my order and I'm crazy. So the answer is, how am I approaching things in life? It happens all the time. Self-righteous indignation is a dangerous one for me because it's not about right or wrong. It's going with the flow.
Yes. There's Alan Watts, who's a famous philosopher, who's a teacher, used to live on his perspective, just to give you some insight into, he used to live on a tugboat in Sausalito. That was his home. But he had this thing, says we must look at life in oscillation. We must look at it from the micro, the macro, and the in-between, because at each one of those perspectives, we get something different about the thing we are examining or the thing we are involved in. And so I could be at the micro level and be very much into the details, but lose sight of the big picture. And I'm working feverishly and I'm going down the road, but it's the wrong road, right? Or I can be at the 10,000 foot level, getting this grand vista, but there's no details to move me towards it. And so as we oscillate and we go from those two extremes to being in the middle, to saying, okay, where is it right now? There's joy just in that. Having a vision, knowing the details I need to obtain that vision or destination, or however we want to frame it. And then that middle way of actually moving towards it, hitting the right details, moving to the right height to get the perspective, and just oscillating back and forth. And eventually we wind up there and there is joy.
Because the joy is in the beingness, not necessarily the doing. Yeah. And it's so, when we live in a society of bigger, better, faster, more, that's all external. If it doesn't look like something shifting, it's hard to perceive that it is.
Yes.
So it's understanding that the big stuff isn't visible. We don't see the roots coming when we plant those seeds. We don't see that it's actually working. We have faith that it's working, and then it starts to blossom. But if we don't have the faith in the beginning, there isn't anything. And it's so often that I can, the human part of me, but I want to know now. I just want to know now.
And I think the metaphor of the journey is so apropos for so many things in life, and definitely for life itself. Because as quiet as it's kept, none of us came here the full size we are now, the smile we have now, the likes and dislikes we have now. We came here as an empty vessel, so to speak, although we had our own idiosyncrasies as our individual selves. But a lot of the stuff that we have now was something we picked up along the journey. And some of the things we picked up along the journey, we have set aside. We no longer carry those things. And there were some things at the beginning of the journey, we said, oh, I don't like that. I don't think I'm going to need that on the journey. And now we're saying, I need to go get that thing for this journey because it's needed. And so the perspectives that we get as we move through life or move through any point A to point B experience is an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity for the joyous expression of overcoming obstacles, of reaching a destination, of finding out more about myself and my decision making. I mean, there's so many things that we can come up with that is just unbelievable. Unbelievable. And so take the journey.
How often do you hear, if I knew then what I know now?
Yes.
And you couldn't, and that's the point of it. So that to be in this now and really appreciate it. Our children will never be this age again. If you have teenagers, you might be saying good, but you miss those years as you get older,
Yeah.
If no matter there are people in our lives today that won't be here a year from now, 20 years from now. We will be different and we will see things differently, regardless of what happens. Nothing, everything is changing. So to miss out on this moment, and so many people, it's so easy to get caught up in the doing that we forget the beingness, which is where we hear spirit. That's where we are our best selves.
And that statement of Alan Watts on the oscillation, like today is my 26th anniversary of my marriage, right? And
congratulations.
Oh, thank you. And it's as we say all the time, it's both and, right? So me and my wife, we look back at things on this journey that we've done in the past, and we've looked at them and had joy and some tears or whatever. And then we look at right here, right now, today, what are we going to do today to celebrate? And so it's that continual, it's like building a mosaic. If you've watched people do mosaics, it's a building upon process, right? And sometimes when they're building that mosaic, you look at it and you're like, I'm not sure what that's going to be. You're turning your head, trying to get a different perspective. But as they continue, what once looked like pure chaos in some cases begins to unfold and begins to be this magical dance of layering on, and eventually, boom, it pops up and it's like, yes, it's great. And that's what life is. And that's what we are hoping to do, I would say, each and every day. There's the grand journey, but each and every day is a journey within a journey.
And it all comes down to our attitude and how we're going. I often say doing the next right thing. And sometimes the next right thing is nothing at all. Yeah. Sometimes it's simply waiting. When you're in a restaurant and you've given your order, you don't go into the kitchen to see if they actually placed the order. And we realize there's going to be a time between when we place the order and when we receive the food. So why we think life is different. And I'm on the East Coast, and we're known for being even less patient, unfortunately, and as well as some other things, and I'm not going to go into those. But we're very fast paced, and we're over caffeinated, and it's coffee shops on literally lines on every corner. And it's trying to fit more. And when the answer isn't about more, it's about experiencing it fuller.
I lived in New York City for about 15 years. And even I wasn't born there. I was born somewhere else. And so when I got there, I had my own way of approaching life and everything from where I grew up. But ultimately, you fall in the line, right? And so everything's a hurry up and wait. And now the technology has just increased that more, because I can instantaneously click something on the tablet or PC and get an answer. But life is about unfoldment. You think about your flower garden, or you think about your fruit tree. You may have, it starts from a dead thing over the winter. It gets some leaves, it gets a bud, it gets some bees to spread the pollen. Eventually that thing blossom falls out, the fruit is there, it grows, it's ripe, you get it. So there's this process or unfoldment, if you, however you want to term it, that is a pattern, I think, for who and what we are and how we develop and engage in life. And if we can just follow those symbols and signs from nature, I think we really begin to understand what life is, and celebrate it and have joy in it, which allows the best of us, the spirit within us, to come forth and have purpose and meaning and intention for what we're doing.
There's always good in everything, regardless of what it seems like in a moment. Yeah. And even the worst of circumstance, there's wisdom and insight through. So it's trusting what we cannot see, so that we see what we choose to see.
Yes.
And it's really a process, and that's where faith comes in. And for me, I often laugh at myself, because when I treat, we have that fourth step of, we have gratitude, we're releasing. Yes. We have to give it over. I can't hold on and think the spirit's going to do what it needs to do. When I'm trying to micromanage, it doesn't work. So before I need to really let it go, and be done with it. And I call that letting God be God, because he does a better job than I will. But how often do I try to micromanage, And
it's funny sometimes, because we all come to whatever, there's the saying, everywhere you go, there you are, right? So we bring our own perceptions and idiosyncrasies and whatever is everywhere we go. And so it begins, if we're aware and we pay attention, we can begin to see that if something is out of line or in a line, either way, the same way every time, well, the only constant in those different times is me. So if I'm finding something I like, it's something that I did. If I'm finding something I don't like, it's something that I did. And so that question then becomes, what is that thing? How do I get my head around it? And then what do I do to transform it into something else? Or in some cases, just let it go.
And the key to it is to witness without judgment. It's not judging ourselves, berating ourselves. It's not about right or wrong. It's simply witnessing, been here, done this, know how this ends, and just rerouting. I like the emotions, to me, are like rumble strips. I look at them as the rumble strips on the highway for us. Mm-hmm. If I'm happy and joy-filled, I'm in the right direction. If I'm not, I need to either seek an alternate route or get back on track.
Yes.
So that's when I look at that and something's not right, it's not about outside. It's about how I'm steering the vehicle. Or am I allowing spirit to steer the vehicle, or am I trying to do it my way?
Yeah. And one thing I've learned and experienced about joy is that joy itself is a two-way street, because it could be pouring down rain, and two people can be standing in the rain, and one person could be saying, "Oh man, what a wonderful experience," and the other person will be cursing up a storm, saying, "I hate this experience." And the person who's experiencing the joy of that rainfall is just in the flow of it, whether they got the umbrella or not. It's a lot of times you'll hear people using that example of rain. They go back to their own childhood when they used to play in the rain or stomp in the mud or whatever it is. They go to this place where it's acceptable. They may not have wanted the rain, but it's acceptable that we got the rain, and because we need rain too. Right now we got all that sun out in the west, out here where I am, and we have the repercussions of that, which is fires.
We have had enough rain for all of you. On the East Coast, we have had a lot of rain, and I was talking to someone yesterday who loves to golf, and she said, I would go. She's like, I wish I could give it to them, and that's the whole thing, is to realize what we get is where we are is what we get, and it's not about getting what we think we want. Happiness is about wanting what we have.
Yes.
So it's because there's pluses and minuses in everything, and it's not about just witnessing it and saying, okay, well, what do I do with this? How do I look at this? Why is this bothering me like it is? Whatever it may be. Because that's when we have triggers, some of us have, everyone has them. Everyone has those hot buttons, whether they're topics, whether they're situations, whether they're people. It's about coming to a different place and just, adjusting the sails.
Yeah. Well, and that's key, because I think, one thing we teach is this whole idea of unity and oneness, right? And so when we look at temperature, somebody gets upset about hot or coldness or whatever, but in reality, there's only one thing: temperature. And based on the degree of temperature or the direction we're moving in terms of temperature, people get upset. But it's still the same thing, right? The temperature is either a little hotter or a little colder, 1 degree up or 1 degree down, but it's still the same thing. And so when we can begin to look at it in a oneness, I think, and understand that, okay, on this spectrum of the oneness of temperature, there'll be some variances, there'll be some noticeable distance of our awareness, but it's still the same thing. And so if I start bashing temperature, and I'm more of a cold person than a hot person, I got to take the bitter with the sweet, because if I get rid of temperature, I don't know what I might get. It might be better than hot temperature or cold temperature.
In New England, you could get 3 seasons in the matter of 2 hours. It happens quick here. We can drop 20, 30 degrees one way or the other.
Yes.
So, we get the variation. But life is like that. And we go in cycles, and different things happen. And, we are, we're not just the captains, but we are also directing because we're attracting. And the important thing for people that are new is to remember that part of that is not blaming. There's nothing wrong with wherever we are, we're supposed to be. It's all good. So it's not about saying, well, I didn't want this. I would never have. It's not about that. It's whether it's conscious or unconscious. The gift in it is that you never have to be a victim again. You never have to not pay attention again. Mm-hmm. And it's that, to me, the freedom in that is beautiful.
Yeah. And I like that, because, part of joy is freedom, I believe, because what makes me happy may not necessarily make you happy, or vice versa. But that feeling of joy, that impetus to celebrate, is an individual thing, again, on a spectrum. There's some people who like to watch fireworks. There's some people who don't. And we can go down the line. But I think the linchpin of it is when someone gets that feeling of joy, no matter how they get it, the emotional and physical and all the aspects of the body are very similar, and within a certain tolerance, they're experiencing pretty much the same thing. And that's what the key is.
And we get to choose to be there. And just like we can choose peace. That's the other show that I host on Monday nights is the Peace Circle. Because there's plenty of people that want peace, but am I peaceful? And how do you get there if you don't know how? I was raised inner city Boston. I didn't know what peace was. I assumed it meant not war, but I didn't know what inner peace. I had no concept, not only of it, but how to get it. Most of my childhood, I slept with the radio on. I never not had noise. And I lived right near the airport. In my backyard, you could see Logan Airport. I didn't know how not to have noise around me, to the point that and there was so much turbulence in my life that I was unsettled in peace and quiet. I heard a ringing in my ear rather than feeling of peace. So there's spectrums too. And you don't go straight from chaos to calm. There's steps along the way. And it's just knowing what we choose at any given point makes such a difference.
Yeah. I agree with that, because, if I look back over my life and I look at the things that I'm joyous about, like one of the things I'm joyous about is genealogy, family history, and that sort, right? Well, in the beginning, I wasn't so happy. Actually, it was a torment, because I didn't know certain things about my family, about my father, my mother. They both died when I was young, and I knew more about one than the other. But there was some broken pieces there that was not joyous, was not fun, was not something that I wanted to really engage in. But over time, trying to understand and put this puzzle back together, if you will, it has become one of the most joyous things that I have done. And it's been a journey. I've been on this journey for 25, 30 years now. But it's yields some great results. There are some letdowns in there because I can't find this or can't connect this. But the joys are just monumental in either way, because another one of my joys is history. So as I go down this path, I'm able to look at myself and my father and grandfather or my mother in relationship to historical events as I go through this. So it has a great joy. There's something my father did that made me mad. Well, when I go back and look at when he was born and what may have been happening at a certain time, I could see, I can see how he could have that opinion and did not, agree with me on certain things, right? And then there's a joy in that, of understanding. There's a joy of saying, I understand my father a lot better now, even though he's been gone many, many years.
The compassion is always in, through, and as, and for the one. So when we show compassion to others, we're allowing ourselves to be human as well. So all of those things, it's full circle. Plus that now you get to share that. I know you have a son. How many children do you have?
I have 3. Yeah. So, and a few grandkids and a great grandkid. And yeah, sharing that is going to be great.
It's all a gift, and it's about how we look at it. It does. It all comes full circle. So and we didn't even get to the third one, so I'm just going to go back to that again. The third show that you're on is Saturday mornings, the Science of Mind lecture series.
Yeah, and that's a great series, I think, because we have about 7 or 8 of us ministers and practitioners who we started in January, and the goal, and the intent was to go through the textbook chapter by chapter. And so right now we're about halfway through. I'm actually, Dr. Tracy Brown is going to be there this Saturday, and I'll be next Saturday. And it's just a fun little program. It's a 45-minute program, give or take. we look at the chapter, we kind of summarize it and highlight certain points. It's a question and answer type thing. You can ask questions and we'll answer them as we can on the air. And it's just a great opportunity for those who are looking to engage this practice and this philosophy and this way of life to ask the tough questions, if you will. I mean, we may not have all the answers, but we'll sure entertain the question and do our best, or try to point you to a source that will give you that answer if we can't come up with something that at least gets you motivated to go and seek. You know, one of my fellow ministers said something to me a few weeks ago. It'll be with me forever. He says, as ministers and leaders and practitioners, we're merely tour guides. We're not necessarily the expert on a thing. We know the thing, but we're a tour guide. You know, we can point out the certain sites and give you certain dates and tell you certain, events. But ultimately, it's you, the individual, that has to determine what part of this tour you want to engage in more. Do you want to look at the artwork more? Do you want to get deep into the history, or do you want to go into the practical experience of it? So as a tour guide, my job as a minister or as a practitioner is to be versed in what's going on and be able to point out the highlights and give some examples and allow people to gravitate to what they are made of, if you will.
I love that analogy, tour guides, because it sometimes, it's not about a responsibility to. In other words, there's nothing that we can convince. We're not here for that. Mm-hmm. And Wayne says he's the captain of his own experience, both hands on the wheel. Absolutely, yes. Wayne. And if anyone has questions, please know that we're live and you're welcome to ask anything. And it is a beautiful teaching. And that's, to me, the best part of New Thought, is that this is a teaching. This isn't a religion as this is the way it is. It's always this. It's only this. It's a teaching that we're constantly learning and constantly understanding, because as we move, as we change and grow, our understanding of it does the same. And the more that we make the time and make it the priority to do that, is how we get to use the law.
Yes.
And be in that place of joy more often.
Yeah.
Many people, I think, are attracted to our teaching because of things like The Secret, where it's like a wish list, like the genie in the bottle. The spirit isn't Santa Claus. It's not about just a parking spot. They're nice. Cash is good. Don't get me wrong. It will take all good in all forms. And it's so much deeper than that. The experience of life isn't about the stuff.
Yeah. And there's that thing that says, there's no big or small in God. So whether you ask for a parking space or for the perfect mate or the ideal job, when we put ourselves in right alignment with the principles and laws of the universe, things happen. The law of electricity has been around way before we figured it out, right? And then once we figured it out, then we figure out there's several ways to get it. We can get electricity from thermal, from solar, from turbine, from fossil fuel, from nuclear, all these different ways of applying the law to extract a principle called electricity to introduce it into our lives. So someone who's living in Antarctica, where there may not be a lot of sun, well, they may not, adhere to the solar energy. They may need to deal with wind because it may have better wind. So they put turbines. And so we achieve these things by paying attention, by some experimentation. And then we find and lock in to where we should be to obtain our own joy, our own guidance, our own path in life. And then we will find people on the journey that's going the exact same way we are.
The like-minded souls that we're meant to meet will absolutely show up when we're living in that integrity, when we're living in that place of honesty and truth to ourselves too. That's the thing. It's not about what someone else says to do or suggest. It's not about someone else. It's not how we were raised. It's not about any of that. Like you said, people may guide us, but that doesn't necessarily mean they know what's best for us.
Right. Right.
I don't even know what's best for me. That's why I pay attention and I ask spirit, and I as often as I can. And I'm still like a petulant child at times. I'm still at that kid, but I want to know now. I do it all the time.
Because it's funny, right? So there are these you go on vacation, you take these tours, and you go on some of them, and you're like, wow, I hope this never ends. And then there's some, the first chance you get an exit, you're like, ooh, I'm out of here. And that's how life is, right? That we have certain experiences or certain journeys, and we just like, oh wow, I want this to go on for a little bit longer. And there are certain experiences we have, we're like, I took a wrong turn at Albuquerque. I should have went left. I went right. That wasn't good. So we have to keep that in mind, that again, joy is this unfolding thing, I believe, and that what was joyous yesterday may not be joyous today, and vice versa. And then
it's available no matter where you are.
Yes.
That's the most important thing that's why I chose this. My first book is called The Joy is in Your Journey to Happiness. That's the first book that I wrote. And the reason for it was because it was at the worst time of my life. And even at that point where my sister and dad were both going through the experience of cancer and like hospitals and surgeries and back to back, and it was horrible. There were still moments that I found myself laughing. And I thought to myself, if these two things can exist at the same time, if the grief and the fear and the stuff can be there to the extent that it is, and I can still find things to laugh about, then it's always accessible to me. Yeah. And it was before our teaching, but it was that awareness that it is always a choice. And that really hit something in me that I've always gone back to. That's why I say our emotions are those rumble strips.
Yeah. And that just gave me a whole new meaning to that phrase that says there's no place where God is not, right? Because right there in the midst of your dealing with some angst and anguish, there was some laughter and joy right there in that moment. So that thing that a lot of us fear or don't want to experience or whatever, even in that, there's a moment of joy. There's a moment of God. There's a moment of laughter. And so it's again, I believe one thing that helps is that oscillation. I can still be in a place where I have to acknowledge something I don't want, but at the very same time realize the joy of it all.
And it's all a gift. Even what seems horrible is also often a gift in itself, because it's as important to know what I don't want than it is to know what I do. And it can come in many forms. And sometimes the worst experience leads us to the best, because I know what I don't want. It takes what it takes in any given situation.
Right.
And there was one more thing that I wanted to ask you about before time, because time flies. It goes so fast. I know you said your greatest joy is learning. You love history, but especially ancient wisdom.
Yes.
Share that passion.
Well, and it's more relevant today, I think, than before, because we have all these issues about race and gender and origins and all of that. And so when we go back and look through time in the ancient times where the so-called not as advanced people as we sometimes like to call them, and we look at the monuments and the volumes of wisdom that they've left us, that had no cell phone, that had no computer, that had no tablet. When we look at that ancient wisdom and creations, it has to humble you. If you're really a student of life, you have to be humble to think about there's a pyramid out there in Egypt that's been there for a very long time, still standing, and we can't build one today, given all the technology and math that we think we have now. You know, we look at what happened in ancient Mesopotamia or up in some of the South American desert and plateaus where they have these figures and things there that you can only see them from the air, but they're perfect anatomical correct animals and things. And so to go and look at that, it's exciting and joyous to me to figure out what state of mind and what level of surrender did they have to buy into to achieve these monumental tasks that we can't duplicate today with all of our whatevers we got. So it's just all there's a joy in that, trying to put myself in the middle of it and understand it as best I can.
I've always been fascinated with, to me, Egypt and all that went before and all that they did. And, you know, who knows? The one thing I know is that I don't know. And the older I get and the more I study, the less I know. Yeah. And I don't care. I have nothing to prove. It's all good. And I love to learn and be, like you said, a student of life. And everybody has the things that they're interested in. And we're meant to expand. The universe itself expands. And when we don't, that's when we have resistance. That's when there's pain, because we're fighting against that natural expansion of life.
And you know, interesting thing about studying ancient cultures, right, is an ancient wisdom is where do you start, right? Okay, we know about ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt and some of the indigenous of the Americas and their journey, but where did they come from? You know, and people say, all right, do we go back to Atlantis, or was there something before Atlantis? And you know, we can get into spirals of speculation, but we do know that these other societies in Mesopotamia and Rome and all these places did exist. And you got the Hanging Gardens of Babylon and the Colossus Roman Greek theaters and arenas and stuff. These things were massive undertakings. And so for me, there is a pure joy and drive, if you will, to just, you know, as they say, something. I just want to touch the hem of the garment and see if I can pick up something on how they navigated life. And of course, they had their ups and downs, as everybody does. That's the journey, right? But the things that they were able to achieve, given what we know, at least consciously, what they had available, is amazing. It's amazing.
Sometimes the more we have in our lives, the more complicated it gets, the more we miss out on the simplicity.
Yes.
You know, they've done studies, and some of the happiest countries in the world are some of the poorest. Yeah. You know, we didn't rate anywhere near top 10 because we actually have more people on antidepressants and all kinds of medications. And I'm not saying absolutely whatever's needed is needed. It's a real thing, but that's much of is misalignment. Disease often comes from dis-ease. We know that. So how much misalignment were we given as children, that we taught, that we've taken on, that has just expanded in our culture and society? When we are taught in these teachings to live from the inside out, and in a society that only notices the outside and tells us how we're supposed to feel, you know, it's those mixed messages can wreak havoc.
Yeah, as opposed to being aligned internally, the society kind of wants us to and force us in some ways to be in alignment with this external thing that is not the real thing, in my opinion, and it's not the everlasting thing, because when we look at the internals of humankind, our hearts and lungs and stuff, they may have advanced and gotten better, but they all still work the same way. Well, what worked back in the 1900s, horse and buggy, in some places you can still use them and they'll be effective, but that's not the thing to do right now.
Well, now they're quaint. Now you can do that. The Boston Commons takes you around on a horse and buggy ride, very romantic and sweet, but it's not. You're not going to take it to work.
Right. And we just saw in the last 2 weeks people taking personal flights into space. So that part is ever changing, but the human being, it may be getting better in terms of stronger and such, but I still need a heart. I don't think we're gonna come up with a human without a heart or without some lungs. And so we may be refining, but we're not changing, and society is changing, and we have to figure out how to get in alignment once we're in line in time.
And my last question that I'm going to ask you, as I love this, your motto, that's don't go where there's a path, go where there's no path, and leave a trail.
Oh, yes. I think that's the science of mind, religious science way. One of Ernest Holmes' greatest statement was, don't take my word for it. Go out and practice these things and use them in the laboratory of your own life. Meaning you got to go experiment. If you just stay on the beaten path, you could be successful and so forth, but that's a known quantity pretty much. There's going to be some degrees of whatever, but it's a known quantity. But if I get here and say, I'm going off, well, now there may be some discoveries out there on that path that's on the trail that weren't on the path. And that's where life begins, I think, to really be joyous. Because there's some scaredness, there's some excitement, there's some stuff about, I don't know what I'm going to encounter. But I know I'm ready for it because God has made all situations possible.
Absolutely. And we get to choose our own, we get to point ourselves in the direction of, and life happens, and sometimes we're taken off course.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's the best thing that can happen. Other times it can be devastating. But again, it's the lenses that we're looking through. Yeah. I am not the person that I was. I mean, if I look at my life now compared to 10 years ago, or 12 years ago, it's night and day to who I was. And there's a lot of things in my life that I wish I didn't have to know now. And I have always had this inherent feeling all of my life, shoulda, woulda, coulda have already been there.
Yeah.
I haven't done enough. That underlying feeling of more.
Yeah. And
as soon as I started ministerial school, that went away. It was never part of my plan. It was never anything that I wanted. And here I sit a senior, and I still think it's insane, but here I am. But it was the first time in my life that I didn't feel like I should have already been somewhere. But had all that transpired to get me here, that was not any of what I would have chosen, not happened, I wouldn't be here. And I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And that's where our faith comes in, is knowing that like that mosaic, we don't know what the heck's coming up. But when we step back and allow Spirit to fill in the details, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, see, you just put the picture in my mind of a sand mandala. If you've ever watched any other monks create those sand mandalas, it's an amazing thing. They create an outline first, and it's like, and I guess they do it different ways, but the way I've seen it is they have these outlines that just look like a big blob, and then they start putting in the details and making the inner intricacy of the inside of that, and it's just. And it truly is a journey, and it's a joyful one when you get there to see. Previously, this was just a space, and then someone had a vision of an outline, and then they detailed that in, and they went from this unseen imaginary thing that was in their mind, and they began to unfold it. And you have no idea where it's going, ultimately until it's done.
And the part of that that amazes me as much as that beauty is that they're so unattached to it that when it's done, they sweep it away.
Yeah. After hours of building.
Because they know beauty comes. Yes. They're not attached to that one thing. It'll always be there in different forms. And when we can get ourselves to that place of understanding the beauty will always be there, regardless of what I see today, that faith, just knowing that we know, that's when we are in that peace and the beauty just is.
Yeah. Wonderful thing.
Thank you so much for being here. The hour absolutely flew by.
Yes, it
I
did.
will definitely be catching your, everything from our prayer team to, so he's one of the people that when you send your emails to prayer@ntmedia.org for our prayer team, this is one of those wonderful ministers that is there to pray and know your truth.
Yes.
And, with all the shows and everything that you do with your as a senior minister, as everything, dad, granddad, everything. Thank you for being here and making the time for this network and the good news. Thank you for your ministry and all that you do. It is a gift, and I really appreciate you being here with us today.
Well, it's my pleasure. And, my dad used to always say, life is for the living. And if you're not living, something else is taking place. And so I try to live and do what I can and have fun and enjoy the journey as I go.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you all for watching. Thank you for and if you wanted to reach out, know that I am here. You can reach me at gina@believeInYouToday.com. And how can they reach you?
The easiest way is just send it to revz@csldenver.org.
revz@csldenver.org. Yep. Perfect. And just knowing that we are here, if there's any questions that come up after you've watched, anything at all, just reach out to us. Also, if there's any topics that you want to see covered, know that we are here between our shows. We are here to fulfill all of that magic. So thank you all for watching. Thank you for being here and being on this joyful journey. Know that this ntmedia.org is here because of people like you. If you've been blessed, go to ntmedia.org and donate. Know that our platform, whatever you goes to making this even better, sharing even more good news with the world. Let people know we're here and that there is good news to be found. So may you be blessed, Revzi, and may each one of you be blessed that is watching, knowing the truth, living that joyful journey in each and every moment. Thank you. Blessings and love. Namaste.
Namaste. So it is.
And so it is.
New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network.